Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I think this is the most number of people we've had along to one of these sessions. We are here as part of the Girl Guiding Badge. And this is the Meet the Physicist or Visit a Physics location part of the badge. Now, obviously, none of you are able to visit a physics location at the moment, and we are not allowed to broadcast from one. Normally, we will be broadcasting from one. We've already got the National Space Centre lined up for later in the year, and we're going to have Susie Imber, who was the winner of You Want to Be an Astronaut on BBC Two, so she's coming along to do one of these for us. We're going to Woolsthorpe Manor later in the year, which is the home of Isaac Newton, who you may have heard of. So watch out for these. Just because you watch this one doesn't mean that you are now inoculated forevermore against meeting physicists. We'd be delighted for you to come along and do it again in the future. You should hopefully all be working towards this thing here, which is the I Am a Physicist badge. Sorry if any of you have been waiting for one of these. We had a bit of a hold up on the production front, but there are currently another 1,500 under my desk. So anybody who needs one, hopefully that's going to all be good. So you've probably had enough of me talking on for a while, because what you're actually here to do is to meet some other physicists as well as myself, one of whom is Natalie Rhodes. Wave, Natalie. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Natalie is a brain function imaging physicist. So I think she's going to tell you what that means in a moment. And the second person is Sarah Bugby, who, sorry, Sarah, what do you do?
I'm a lecturer and I look at new cameras to detect gamma radiation.
Gamma radiation detection cameras. I mean, that is exciting in itself. And Sarah's at Loughborough University. So here we are in the East Midlands. I'm from Ashby de la Zouch. I only say that because that's an exciting word to say. I'm mainly just going to be here to read out your questions and read them out to our speakers. So what's going to actually happen at this point is that first Natalie and then Sarah are going to introduce themselves, tell you about themselves and tell you about what they've done and how they've got to where they are and the kind of work that they do now. And then after they've both done that for about 5 minutes each, we're just going to throw it open for questions. So you should hopefully see a little, is it in that side? Maybe it's this side. a little arrow on your screen, and that will open up a question pane, and then you'll be able to send in your question. So if you just put your first name or something like that, and I will read out the questions. Now, we've had a couple of people who can't see us or can't hear us. So the people who can't see me, try turning off the thing that we have open and turning it on again, and hopefully you should be able to see us. I'm sorry, it sounds like a really simple solution, but it works almost all the time. The people who can't hear me, I'm about to write to now and tell them how to sort it out. But while I do that, if Natalie, if you could get cracking, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And when you want to share your screen, just tell me.
Can I share my screen from the start?
Yes, you can. I will do that just now.
I've put a little PowerPoint just to show some pictures, because what I do is best shown in pictures. So can everyone see my screen? One second. So, can you see just the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. So I'm Natalie Rhodes and I'm a physicist, and I'm going to tell you a bit about my background and what I do as well. So I'm from a little town in West Yorkshire, so a bit north of here, called Halifax. And I'm going to start from secondary school. And I went to a school called Crossley Heath, which looks a lot like Hogwarts. Unfortunately, we didn't do magic, and I wasn't as cool as maybe Harry Potter was. But so I went to a school like that. And when I was younger, I did not know what I wanted to do at all. When I was in primary school, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But then I realized I don't actually like blood and I'm a bit squeamish. So I thought maybe not a doctor. And then when I was in like year 7 to 9 of secondary school, I thought I wanted to be a makeup artist or a fashion designer. Then I realized I'm not that good at drawing, and I didn't find anything that I wanted to do. So it wasn't until I started my GCSEs that I started to find something that I was really interested in. So I started to really enjoy maths. And I know it sounds weird. When I was younger, I didn't like maths as much, but when I got to GCSEs, I found it really fun and satisfying solving problems. So when I was choosing my A-levels, so I did well at maths GCSE, and so when I was choosing my A-levels, I decided to choose as much maths as possible. So I did maths, further maths, and physics. So I chose physics because I thought, okay, this is just maths but applied in the real world. So I wanted to do use my maths to solve some problems in the real world. So that's why I chose physics. So during my A-levels, I decided that I was really interested in the climate crisis and climate change. So I decided I wanted to go and work in renewable energy. So I was looking for degrees that meant I could do that. And I started looking at things like electrical engineering, lots of engineering-based degrees. But I didn't like the look of them. So someone told me that I could maybe go and do kind of renewable energy, but after doing a degree in physics. So I started to apply for physics degrees. So that's where I got to Nottingham. So I got my grades from my A-levels and came to Nottingham to do an undergraduate degree in physics. And it was a 4-year degree called a Master of Science at the end of it, which sounds pretty cool. So in my first year, I still thought I wanted to do climate science and things like that. But then when I got to my second and third year, I started to notice that I really enjoyed the modules on something called medical physics, which is basically taking the physics that we were learning and the maths and applying it to healthcare and medical settings. So it means that we could use our physics and maths to help people who are sick to get better. And that just sounded so interesting to me, kind of back to where I was in primary school when I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I think I just wanted to help people. And so then I could do that, but without the blood and the gory bits that I didn't like the sound of. So I graduated my degree last year during quarantine. So this is my quarantine graduation picture. Me and my mum, we made a graduation cap out of a bin bag. I have a black coat on and I have a kitchen roll as my scroll. And the best thing about a quarantine graduation is that my cat could come along. So that's me with my cat there on my graduation day last year. So what do I do now? So I'm in the first year of my PhD at the University of Nottingham, and I work at the SPMIC, which is the Sir Peter Mansfield Imaging Centre. And I work on something that has a very long name called magnetoencephalography, or MEG for short, which is much easier to say. So basically, what is MEG? Right, so when you think or you use any of your senses, so if you move or you smell or you taste, things are going on in your brain. And your brain is made up of these things called neurons, which look just like this little cartoon picture here. And in fact, it is made up of 100 billion neurons. That's more than 10 times the number of people on our entire planet. So your brain contains that many neurons, okay? And so when you do something like thinking or moving, those neurons light up, they activate, they come into action, okay? And they have an electrical signal. And so but we can measure it like a magnet. So, you know, the magnets you have on your fridge door, the brain like the active part of the brain, you can detect like a magnet. So these magnets and this magnetic field is really, really small. So we have to use some really, really powerful sensors to be able to detect these fields. So traditionally, we use this system that looks a bit like a hair dryer from a hair salon. It's massive and you have to sit really still in it. So it means you can't move about, and it's really difficult for children to be able to sit in places like this for a long time. So what we've been doing is we've been using something called quantum physics to develop these really cool new sensors, which these can be put on the head, and without this big system, And so you can see in the picture here, they can be put on the head and you can move about while you're wearing them. And so we can look at what's going on in the brain while you're moving and while you're just sat naturally. So this is my boss here, and she's got a 3D printed cast on her head with some sensors in it, and she's just drinking a cup of tea, and we can see what's going on in her brain while she lifts her arm up to drink a cup of tea, which I think is pretty cool. Now I have a video, but I think the audio doesn't work, so I just wanted to show a little bit here where we've got some actual video footage of, this is my boss here. She can move her finger and move about, and she can even play a bit of ping pong. And you can see in the brain here what's going on. So we can see this little blue blob will show the part of the brain that's working while she's doing this, which I think is pretty cool. So we'd even put these on children. So this adorable picture is of a 2-year-old who's wearing a bike helmet. And what we did was we drilled holes into this bike helmet to put the sensors in, so this 2-year-old could wear it and we could look at the brain of a 2-year-old. And this picture here is me, and I had another bike helmet, an adult one, with holes drilled in. And there's even more sensors in this now because we've got some new ones that are smaller than the original ones. And so now we're actually getting to a point where you can see with the 2-year-old, they've got maybe 15 sensors on their head, but we have now got to a point where we can put 50 sensors. So this is my colleague, and she's got 50 sensors on her head to be able to look in more detail at what's going on across the whole brain. So my specific project, so with PhDs, you often look at a very specific question in science. So mine is that we've managed to make it work with this toddler with 15 sensors on his head. But now we have 50 sensors, and we want to be able to look at babies' brains, because when you're little and you're growing up, your brain's really interesting. We want to know what's going on. So the problem we have is that our sensors, when you put them really close together, they don't work quite as well. So my job is to try and solve that problem so that we can look at how babies' brains change as they grow up. So I don't just do all work. So I have some hobby outside of my PhD. So during lockdown, I've started running, and I really love doing that. I'm a massive bookworm. When I was little, I used to get told off for staying up at night reading with my lamp on and turning it off when my mum came upstairs. And I've recently really started to love cooking and baking. Hopefully it'll go a bit better than the man in this picture, although I did just drop my tea on the floor earlier today, so maybe not. But you might see me on Bake Off in 15 years from now if it goes well. And that's everything I've got to show you. Oh,
You're muted, David.
And now you've had the perfect work moments where somebody starts talking without turning off their mute button. Yes, thank you very much, Natalie. That's absolutely brilliant. It takes me back. I did medical physics at university, although I ended up doing something else entirely in the end. But physics is this kind of thing that you can do one thing and then you can do another, and then you can do another, and then you can do another. You don't have to do the same thing for your whole career, which is absolutely brilliant. And it just looks like fun. Is it fun? It is
100%.
So, yeah, absolutely brilliant. And now, Sarah, I think you kind of started off in the same area. Is that right, Sarah? But you do something a bit different now. Do you want to tell us about what you've been up to?
Yeah, so my work also relates to medicine, and it relates to seeing inside the body, but I use a very different type of technology to do it. So I'm Sarah, I'm a physicist, and it's lovely to be here, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. I work as a lecturer, which means I work at a university and I do some teaching. I teach university students, and I also do research, which is science when we don't know what the answers are and we're just kind of poking things and trying to see what's going to happen. It's a really, really fun thing to have as a job. It's really nice for there to be no answers, like you're the one making the answers for the first time. It's a really exciting place to work. But I absolutely did not plan to do this my entire life. When I was your age, I had no idea a lecturer was a job, I don't think. I didn't even know I was going to be a physicist or even a scientist. I always knew I liked science. So when I was a little kid, my favourite TV shows were David Attenborough documentaries. And I used to watch the documentaries, and then I'd go into my garden and I'd find worms and beetles, and I'd pretend to be David Attenborough, which, to be honest, still sounds like quite a lot of fun. So I liked science. I liked documentaries about how the world worked, and I liked science fiction and shows like Star Trek, which kind of tell you how the world might be able to work once we solve all of these scientific problems. So I knew I liked science, and when I went from primary school into secondary school, I did all the science. So I did science GCSEs, and then when I went on to A-levels, again, I did all the science. I still hadn't decided or settled on physics, and I enjoyed them all equally, but I was better at physics because for me, I'm not very good at remembering things. If you tell me the name of something, 30 seconds later, I would not be able to repeat it back to you. And I found in school with physics, I didn't have to remember names of things. I just had to remember how to do things. And I was good at that. So when I was maybe 17, 18, physics was what I was best at. But I still didn't specifically want to do physics. I still didn't know what doing physics as a job would mean. And I left school. And I did a few other jobs, and I worked in offices, which I hated, and I worked in shops, which I quite liked, but I didn't want to do it forever. So in the end, I went to university just because I hated my current job, and I did physics just because it was the thing I found easiest at school. And it wasn't until I was at university when I was like, oh my God, I love this. I really enjoy doing research, which is the science when you don't know the answers. And I want to do this for as long as I can. So I kept doing it, and that's how I ended up here. That's how I got here. And now what I actually do. So my work is all about how we can take pictures of gamma radiation. So radioactivity, you'll have heard about, is what makes the Hulk big and green, only that's not real life. But it is this invisible kind of radiation. It's like a really strong type of light that our eyes can't see. But it is useful in all kinds of areas. So you'll have heard of nuclear power. So nuclear power stations, they use radioactivity to make energy. And it would be really useful for them if they could see what was going on inside their reactors or inside the containers of nuclear material that they use. If you're at an airport and you have scanners, sometimes it's really important to check there's no radioactivity being transported. And, well, you'll have heard of maybe nuclear power disasters where there's spills, there's radiation in the environment. You need to be able to find it and clean it up. And the area I probably work in most is actually medicine. There's all sorts of procedures or diagnoses that use radioactivity. You put radioactivity into a patient, you take a picture of it, and that helps the doctors understand what's wrong and how to help. And all of these things need you to be able to take a picture of gamma radiation. It's really difficult, though. We can't see it, it's invisible. And even normal cameras can't see it. If you put your phone camera up to try and image some gamma radiation, the gamma radiation would pass straight through. You wouldn't get a picture. So I work on new materials and new types of cameras that are able to see gamma radiation, so that we can show all the people who work with it exactly where it is and what they're looking at. And it's really fun. That's me.
That's absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to share a couple of comments that I got while you were both talking. One is from Maddie, age 7. Natalie, your job is so cool. Tell me more about it. I guess we're probably going to get into that in the questions. So better if we just get some kind of specific questions in, and then we'll be able to explore your jobs more. And somebody else said, Sarah, your job is amazing. Wow, I want to be that when I grow up. So hopefully we'll get into those bits while we go through it. Now, just excuse me for just 1 second. My dog is being an idiot and needs to leave the room. So excuse me a moment. There he goes. Goodbye. Right, and the best. So we had a brilliant question came in right near the start, and this was from Holly. And she said, and I'm smiling while I say this because the answer is obviously yes for every scientist who has ever done anything. Have you ever done an experiment that went wrong? Who wants to jump in first?
I don't think I've ever done an experiment that went right the first time.
I think that's a big part of science, is doing experiments that go wrong. But it's kind of like when you're a child and you play with things and you might not do it right the first time. It's how you learn. And so we're kind of like children playing with their toys and playing games, and we're just learning from it each time. Sometimes I do feel very lucky, and thank you to those comments earlier. I absolutely love my job. I come home in the evening from the lab and I'm so excited about it still. And it feels like I'm playing. So yeah, we do get things wrong all the time, but that's half of the fun.
Yeah, if everything goes right, we just don't learn anything, do we? Emily's also said, so cool. And Eris has said, I love your jobs. So yeah, I kind of love your jobs as well. I should probably quit what I'm doing now. No, let's not do that. Right, somebody, Ariana has asked from Seren, has asked, is it possible to see the brain in colour in the future? Make of that what you will.
So by the brain in colour, so what we do is we use the colours to show what the changes in what changes are happening in the brain. So your brain, unfortunately, isn't multicoloured, although a lot of the pictures we use to show it have lots of pretty colours, and we always use really nice colours, which is really bad for my boss is colourblind, so he can't see all the colours on the brains when we show it. So like, look at the blue region and he can't tell which one's the blue region. But we do love having lots of colours, and in the future hopefully we'll be able to see how anybody's brain works by putting them in a system like this. So lots of the methods usually to look at how people's brains don't work for certain types of people, like I said, like babies and children, but also old people. So sometimes old people get conditions where they can't sit still or can't lie still, and so we haven't been able to understand what's going on in their brain because they can't stay still. So hopefully using the technology we've been working on, we'll be able to see what's going on in their brain and why they're not very well, which is really interesting.
Right, a question to both of you from Lily, who's 8. What's the best experiment you've ever done? And maybe it's one from your career, or maybe it's something that you remember as a kid, or whatever. What's the one you've really enjoyed?
I'll let you go first, Sarah.
So one of my favourite things we do at the moment, because we want to make new cameras that can go into hospitals that can look at people. But when we're designing and developing a brand new camera, we don't want to get a lot of people into the lab and waste their time on something that might not work. So we have to make a model of a person that we can fill with radioactivity and treat it just like a real person. So basically what this means is that sometimes my boss will come into my lab and I will be standing there with several plastic heads, which are beeping because they're radioactive. And it makes me seem like a crazy person, but it's really fun.
That was good. For me, the one experiment I remember from school that I loved the most was that our teacher showed us how vinyl records work. And so she had a turntable and put a vinyl record, you know, the ones that play music. They don't really use them much anymore, but they're having a bit of a comeback at the moment. And she put it on a turntable and put a pin with a cone of paper and held it against it. And I remember her playing ABBA out loud by just holding a pin to it. And it was so interesting to learn how this thing works. And in fact, I have a vinyl player just sat right over there now because I'm such a fan of it now. And so that really stuck with me as an experiment that I always thought was really cool.
That's amazing. A school experiment that now, kind of like 10 years later or whatever, has changed your life.
Yeah.
Florence, age 9. This is an interesting one, actually. How many experiments do you do a day?
That depends on the day. So some days I will spend the entire day in the lab. So over 8 hours. It might be one experiment, but I'll take hundreds of measurements. I'll look at lots of different positions and lots of different things and try lots of different settings to get the best pictures possible. So yeah, sometimes hundreds in a day. And then some days I'm not in the lab at all. I'm looking at the data. So I'm trying to work out what I found out means. So the data I collected, what does that actually mean? What does it tell me? And yeah, we have teaching, we have other bits and pieces that we do as well.
Yeah, I think it's quite variable. So especially during lockdown, obviously we're not in our lab every day. You have to have it, mine's still open, but it's COVID secure, so you can only have a set number of people in. So sometimes I'm not doing any experiments in a day. And I'm just looking at some of the measurements I've taken when I've been in the lab. But sometimes we could do 30 experiments in a day, just playing around with sensors, moving them, or scanning people. So my days change a lot with what we're doing. So sometimes I might be sat with the helmet on and I'm moving my finger or I'm listening to something. But sometimes I'm just moving some sensors about, and sometimes I'm not doing experiments at all.
I'm smiling here because somebody called Maddie is going really, really saying about baby brain, wow, 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 wow. And somebody says, I want to be one of you and you're amazing. So, you know, I think people are getting quite excited by this, which is absolutely brilliant. One quick question. So we've got one of our leaders here. What she wants to know, why do you think there's not so many women in STEM careers? And she also wants to know if we're well paid as physicists. I mean, we don't have to bandy around actual money, but so I guess it's a question about, firstly, women in physics, and also, you know, is it a good job? Is it a good career to get into?
I think it's a fabulous job. I mean, it might not be the most high paying job in the world, but it's you do get to play all day. So if someone's going to pay you reasonably well and you have fun the entire time, I would say that that's worth it. So it is a good job, and you can do a physics degree. You can learn physics and then end up going anywhere. So I work in sensors, but it's for medicine. But physicists work in all sorts of jobs and in all kinds of places. So it's an excellent job to have.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, we know that physicists are actually the 5th best paid graduates in the country. So although you may not be paid a fortune, physicists as a whole maybe. Sorry, go on.
That's because physicists get everywhere. So yes, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about women in physics. And yeah, there's fewer women in physics than some other subjects. But it is getting better. If we look at our students, there's more and more female students every year, which is great. And we find each other. So even though there might not be as many women overall, I think we all know plenty of women who do physics. So there's still that community.
Yeah, I think it's getting so much better about like females in physics, especially in the past 5 or 10 years. So even from when I started my degree, so that was only 5 years ago, to now the first years in the same undergraduate degree, the same university, there's way more women than there used to be. It's changing, and it's changing slowly but surely. And I think it's a very positive thing. The field I work in, medical physics, in fact, in my team, there's more girls than there are boys, which is really cool. And my supervisor is really supportive and brilliant. And I think that's important. And obviously, female role models are a really big, important part of this. So the centre I work in, 2 of the people right at the top, the best professors in the centre are women, and they've got children and they've got amazing careers, and they're so inspiring. And I think that's really encouraging more women into the role and the job, because sometimes it can, if there's lots of men and not very many women, you kind of think, okay, what's putting the rest of them off? I don't know if I want to do that. But when you see these women who are having this amazing career, it really encourages you. And I think that's helping getting more women into physics.
Yeah, your jobs both sound cool, from Chloe and Sophie, and an entirely different Sophie says science is amazing. So if everybody realizes that loads of you sent in questions right at the start, and so I'm still working through stuff that was sent in about 7 minutes ago. So I'm going to work through the questions in the order I've got them. So please be patient. And Chloe wants to know, what's the best and worst things about your jobs? Time for a little bit of honesty about what the worst bit of your day is, as well as what the best bit is.
I'm going to cheat a bit and say it's the same thing. So we've said that sometimes we do experiments that don't work. What we've maybe not explained fully is sometimes we do experiments that don't work for months. Spend a lot of time just trying things, and it's not working. And it's frustrating, and sometimes you just want to give up and never look at the equipment again. And yeah, it is not the most fun. But 6 months later, when you do something and it does work, that is the best feeling in the world. So how hard it is can be annoying, but it's also one of the best things about it.
Yeah, I agree. And to add to that, it's hard to keep doing the same thing that doesn't go right. But then, yeah, when it works, it's an amazing feeling. And I think one of the other negative things, I'm early on in my career and I'm not very well paid at this moment. But like we said, I am paid enough to live and still have nice things. And I get to do a job that I love. But yeah, I think it's hard when things don't work well, and you keep doing it and you don't know why it's not working well. But I think one of the things is it's so difficult because you can't just search it on Google. You can't just, usually if you've got a question and you don't know the answer, you could look it up in a book, or you could Google search it, or go on the internet, or ask someone. And by doing science, we're answering questions that haven't been answered before. So you can't Google it and get the answer. And that's both a blessing and a curse, because it's amazing when you are the person that answers this question, but also it can be horrible when you really want to be able to Google the answer.
I completely agree. That's a brilliant bit of it. So a very specific question for Natalie right now. Sorry, Sarah. Isabel wants to know, when you have the hat on, does it hurt and do you feel it?
Oh, okay. So with the old sensors, they were a bit heavier. So sometimes if you were sat wearing it for like an hour or two, it'd get a bit heavy on your head. So maybe your neck and shoulders might be a bit sore and you might feel a bit uncomfortable. But it doesn't hurt. The sensors can get a bit warm at times. So you might feel in summer. So that picture that at the start, and the picture that's in my presentation of me with the helmet on, it was the height of summer and it was really warm. And this helmet's quite warm, you know, it's padded bike helmet, so you might get a bit hot, but it doesn't hurt. It's very easy, and yeah, it's really cool.
Brilliant, thank you. Who was it who liked David Attenborough? Was that
Well,
you? Yes. Okay.
I think.
Amy wants to know, when did you start watching David Attenborough?
For as long as I can remember. David Attenborough has existed my entire life, and yeah, he's always been amazing. He still is.
Okay, Poppy wants a question for both of you, and this is a tricky one, so sorry about that. What's the most interesting thing you've discovered or found out during your research?
Ooh.
Okay, I'll rephrase it a bit. What is an interesting thing? I'm not going to put you on the spot and say it's the most interesting thing you've ever found out, but what's something interesting, something you've gone, oh, really?
That's a difficult question, because I think sometimes, so we go very, very deep into our own specific area. So you think of all the different types of cameras, I only care about one, and then you think of all the different ways they could be designed, I only care about one. You go deeper and deeper and deeper. So the things that I find interesting probably are only that interesting to people in the same area. So it can be difficult to explain the most interesting things. What I've found fascinating learning the subject and working in the area that I do is how much radioactivity helps us in our lives, and especially because radioactivity sounds like a scary thing, and a lot of people think of just bombs and explosions, but really every hospital in the country is using radioactivity to heal people, and that's a fascinating thing.
Cool. So for mine, what I'm currently working on is something that's got a very complicated sounding name called mismatch negativity. But basically, it's how your brain responds. So if you hear a repeating like beep, beep, beep sound, and then suddenly at random there's a tone that goes boop, like a different sounding tone, your brain responds in a really interesting way. And what's really interesting about it is that if you've got mental health illnesses such as schizophrenia, you don't have the same response. And so we can see by doing this beep, 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 boop sound, like the response for schizophrenia patients and normal people. And I think that has really excited me. Like, I've been reading loads about it just because I think it's really interesting, and it's really cool because I get to look at doing that.
Okay, sorry, we on the brain, we've had a brain scientist on this before, and there's always loads of questions about the brain. I'm going to ask a load together that all seem pretty much related. So Maddie wants to know, can you see your brain? And hold on, Emily wants to know, does the brain really look like that? And Amelia also wants to know if you've ever seen an actual brain, and Annette wants to know, sorry, not Annette, Lewis wants to know, do you ever look at animals' brains? So just tell us for a second about brains, will you?
Very interesting question. I have a picture of my own brain on my phone with an MRI. So I'm just trying to find that quickly because I think that's a really cool thing to show. But so firstly, for the animal brains, we haven't looked at it using our system that we're looking at brain function, but I have seen a video of dogs in MRI scanners, and they've been training dogs by teaching them how to go and sit in an MRI scanner. I don't know if you've seen one. It's those big tubes, and you can use them to look at how the brain looks like inside, but you can also use them to look at how the brain works. And they've been doing it to look at how dogs' brains work, which is so cool. So they've been training them to kind of expect treats, and they can see in the brain where lights up when they think that they're going to be getting a treat, which I think is really cool. And I've got a picture of, so I don't know if I can just hold it to the camera. This is my own brain that I got an MRI of, and sometimes I get used in the scanner and I get to see how my brain works, which is really cool. Well, was there another? Oh, someone said, do brains really look like that? They do look weird. I've never seen an actual brain or held a brain like that. I've just seen pictures through the skull using our systems. But yes, they are very weird looking, and I've seen a lot of videos of brains and looking at the different parts, and sometimes I forget because I'm looking at them all day, but they're very weird.
Thank you. Annette wants to know, how often do you do experiments? So I guess she's kind of asking how often are you actually doing experiments, and how often are you just sitting in front of a computer? Although I must say, some physicists, that is the experiments they do. They sit in front of computers, but that's not us. We're not those people.
That does depend as well. It depends what I'm doing. So I'd say maybe a day a week is doing experiments, and perhaps another day a week is not doing experiments, but still in the lab and with screwdrivers and building things and trying things out. So maybe 2 days a week practical versus data analysis or reading other people's work.
Or lecturing people.
Or lecturing people, yeah.
Because we must say Sarah is also a teacher at the university as well. How about you, Natalie?
Yeah, so I obviously don't do any lecturing yet, so most of my time is just for my research. So I might be in the lab maybe 2 days a week, maybe 3. It depends completely. So sometimes I might spend months where I'm in the lab almost every day, but then I might have a whole month where I don't go in the lab at all because maybe I'm writing up some of the work I've done, or I'm making a presentation or doing other things or looking at some of the work I've been doing. So yeah, it does vary a lot, but it's a very nice balance, because I think if you're in the lab just tinkering too much, you won't then get to plan what you're going to do.
Chloe T, very interesting question, one we've not seen before in doing these things. Do you think technology is going to change your jobs in the future? Because I know a lot of people are worried about technology taking away the jobs that they might want to do or something like that. So what do you think?
So I think doing science is one of the jobs that technology can never take over. Technology is going to make our lives easier in some senses. It's going to expand new areas of science that a lot of people can work in. But I don't think we're anywhere near a point where a computer can take over from doing science, because the whole point is we don't know what it is. We're working to push past what people as a species currently know. And computers are fabulous at doing things when we can tell them exactly what it is we want them to do. But science isn't like that. It needs creativity as well as, understanding.
Yeah, I think that's probably the perfect answer, really, is that science is one of the, maybe the safest, in that technology's not yet, we can't really consider technology replacing what we do, except maybe the teaching side. So when people teach, obviously with the pandemic, people pre-record videos, and maybe that might be used instead of lectures for in the future. Hopefully not, because nothing can really replace that face-to-face learning, but there is maybe that at risk. But otherwise, being a scientist is, it works well with technology. Technology is there to help scientists so they can do more rather than stop them.
Okay, I don't know what we were talking about at the time, but about 15 minutes ago, Eris said, wow. So obviously something was great. One of our leaders, Barbara, listening to you talk so enthusiastically about sciences, I wish I'd done more at school. You seem young, Natalie, to have achieved so much. So, but hopefully this is showing everybody that this is the kind of thing you can get into. This is some really good stuff you can do. So moving on. Related to it, so one of our young people, Emily, loves science and maths, but English is her strongest subject. She'd love to do a science job. Any thoughts about that? Kind of matching English with science?
Scientists need more good English speakers and writers. I think something that scientists forget is there's no point doing science if you can't tell it to other people, if you can't spread it. One brain can be so smart, but if you have 20 brains all working together and understanding each other, you can get so much more done. So a big part of being a scientist is writing your work to publish. It's making presentations and speaking to people, and it's things like this. It's outreach to people who maybe don't study science and encouraging people to get involved, because that's how we get the people that have the best talent and are really enthusiastic about the subject.
Very specific question. Why do the magnet things on the hat not work so well when they're close together? From Natalie and Chloe.
Okay, that's quite complicated. So basically, because our sensors, they have to detect really, really tiny magnetic fields. So to put it in perspective, the Earth has a magnetic field, and it's very little. You're not noticing it because your phone doesn't fly out of your hand when you're holding it, or anything metal doesn't move about by itself all the time. But what we're detecting from the brain is 1 billion times smaller than our Earth's field. So it's really, really little. So we have to use quite a lot of technology and lots of different methods to be able to pick these up. And part of that is we actually use some coils that generate a magnetic field inside the sensor. So when you put sensors close together, they start to measure each other's magnetic field rather than the magnetic field from the brain. So it kind of distorts the signal, so you can't understand what's coming from the brain and what's coming from a sensor. if that makes sense.
I think we're most of the way there. Erin, age 7, wants to know how many years does it take to become a qualified physicist? Now, first thing I'm going to say quickly is you're already a physicist. If you're doing this badge, you are already a physicist. You are doing experiments and finding things out. And also, you don't have to go to university to be a physicist. You can do other routes like apprenticeships or anything like that. But we happen to have 2 university physicists. So how long did it take you two to become physicists?
Well, until I had a job as a physicist, which I count PhD student as a job. So that was after school. I did 4 years study at university. But Dave is exactly right. I know people who left school at 16 and they're physicists. They have a job doing physics, but they're physicists. They use the scientific method and they find things out about the world. And you don't have to do it through university.
Yeah, I don't think unfortunately, it's not like becoming a doctor where you kind of pass a final exam or you complete something and they go, you're a doctor now. With physics, I mean, I've got a degree that says I'm a Master of Science now. And I think that was a big thing to get my head around. But I don't have a physics PhD yet. But you'd all still agree that I'm a physicist. I'm working on physics. But there's nowhere in my list of qualifications that says she's a physicist. It just says I've done some physics and I've done more physics and I want to do more physics and I'm going to keep doing this. And I think as long as I want to do anything related to physics, I'm going to be a physicist.
So Sarah has a PhD, which is a doctor. By the way, you get to call yourself doctor. That's what a PhD is. So Sarah is a doctor. Natalie's going to be a doctor. But I've been working as a physicist for 20 years and never got a doctor. So, you know, we're all doing the same kind of jobs. Sarah, Barbara says that we all love your jumper, apparently. And if you move to Warrington, they'll have you as a leader. So if you want to move to Warrington and become a brownie leader, that's something that they will be very much.
Bring the jumper.
Yeah. Emily wants to know how big your laboratories are.
How big?
How big? How big? Are they? I mean, are we talking CERN here? Is it 20 miles across? Or?
Not 20 miles across. It's a big room. So, like, you're in primary school and you have a school hall. And my lab, where I work, is probably half the size of your school hall. But lots of different scientists work in there.
Whereas mine's quite small. So, because of, like I said, the Earth's got a magnetic field. Our sensors don't work in a normal room. So we have to have this specially built room that kind of cancels out the Earth's magnetic field as much as it can. And that room's only a couple of meters each side. And we have a tiny little space on the side for a couple of computers. But otherwise, we're all quite tightly squeezed in there. But yeah, it's not a very big lab.
Lily, interesting one. If you weren't doing the medical kind of physics you do, what other kind of physics would you like to do?
I like the kind of physics where you do get to go in a lab. So that's my favorite type of physics. Obviously, there's a lot of that. So what I do with making cameras for radiation, I work with people in hospitals. But I have also been able to go to nuclear power stations, and that's really interesting. It's like going into a whole city. It's kind of like from a film. So there's places where like hot steam's coming up from the floor. It doesn't seem real. It's a very cool place to visit or to watch a video of if you get a chance. I would like to always be doing physics that's involved in developing technology and getting to go to these places.
I think I mentioned quite earlier on that I'm really interested in the climate crisis and the environment, and the way in my head I think that the future is in green energy, so no longer burning coal to use our electricity, to make our electricity, sorry. And so I would be really interested in working in green energy, maybe even things, something called nuclear fusion, which is really interesting. A bit more like what Sarah does, I guess, with the kind of nuclear sense, a bit more smaller than what I work with. But I think that would be really interesting because I think that would help a lot of people. I like that my physics and the maths that I can do can help a lot of people.
Right, we have so many questions. I'm so sorry. We're entering the last 10 minutes. We're never going to get through all of these. I'm so sorry for everybody who's sent one in that we're not going to get to. I'm trying to match up as many as we can. So Lauren wants to know, who's the best person you've met in your job? Have you met any brilliant people yet? I mean, you're both fairly early on, but...
I meet brilliant people every day. I'm constantly amazed by how brilliant the people I get to work with are. So when you do a PhD, you have kind of an exam at the end. So you have a long conversation and you have to explain everything you've done, and the people examining you see whether you've done enough to get to call yourself doctor. And the person who examined my PhD, she is a medical physicist who works down in London, and she's been doing this for a long time. She started her career in CERN, and she came up when it was really rare for women to be doing physics. And she is such an inspiration, and I still speak to her as often as I possibly can. I think she's fabulous.
That's cool. I guess mine would be, I think you saw the pictures with the scary looking face cast of my boss. I call her my boss. She's the postdoc who works in my team, but everyone refers to her as the boss because she is the powerhouse and the brains behind our team. Our supervisor, who is technically more senior than her, agrees she is the figurehead of what we do. She won an IOP Medical Physics Award last year. She's incredible. She's Spanish, came to the UK having a single English qualification. She's now so fluent that you forget that not only is she doing physics in her second language, but that it's actually English is her second language. She's amazing, and yes, a real inspiration for all the work she's done.
That's absolutely brilliant. I was just going to say, I've shaken hands with the guy who's been on the moon.
That's cool.
And I only got to do that because I'm a physicist. Right, I was hoping not to ask this question, but we've now had 5 people ask it, so you're going to have to answer it. What's the worst experiment you've ever done? Interpret that any way you will.
I probably shouldn't be an experimental physicist because I'm very clumsy. It wasn't really an experiment. The worst carrying I've ever done in the lab involved me dropping a camera and breaking the camera, and the camera was worth about £10,000. And I felt bad about it for a very long time.
I think for mine, I didn't mean for it to be someone else's experiment. So I was a test subject for someone, and I showed you pictures of the big hairdryer looking scanner, and it's not very comfy. And they had an experiment that lasted 2 hours where you had to stare at a little flashing light on a screen in a dark room for 2 hours and not fall asleep. And they had to have a camera that looked at your eyes to make sure you weren't falling asleep. And it was very uncomfy. So that'd be the worst experiment I've been a part of. But I've definitely done ones that have been boring as well. I've had ones where I've had to move sensors 1 millimeter closer to each other. What we found from it was very interesting, but actually doing it was quite boring.
That helped answer Natalie's question about how long you have to wear the helmet for. People are very interested.
That's the longest I've ever done.
Okay, last question on the helmet, I promise. Can the helmet read your mind?
So we get this a lot. So currently people don't understand exactly what conscious thought is. So if you were thinking exactly about a blue elephant, we wouldn't be able to put the helmet on your head and go, right, you're thinking about a blue elephant. But if you're thinking about an elephant versus riding a bike, we'd be able to tell that they're different things. And so if you did it again, we'd be able to tell which one if we knew what happened when you thought of an elephant and thought of riding a bike. So there are some things that you could kind of read a mind, but no one's going to be there going, oh, I know what she's thinking about, and that it's not quite at that level yet.
I'd like to thank everybody who's sending it. I'm going to stop reading them out now because everybody's heads will get bigger. But everybody saying how cool your jobs are is absolutely brilliant. Sophie wants to know, do you work with people from other countries?
All the time. You get to travel quite a lot as a scientist. So I go to Europe quite a lot. I go to America fairly regularly. The most out there place I've gone for my job is Uruguay in South America, and we work with some hospitals there.
That's really cool. I obviously started.
That's cool.
Yeah, I obviously started my PhD during the pandemic, so I haven't been able to travel yet. But like I said, my boss is Spanish. A lot of people, we work with a lot of people. So the sensors we buy are from America. So we work with a group in America. We're currently working with some people in Canada. So it's completely around the whole world. Everyone works together. There's no kind of England versus other countries. Science is such a collaborative thing, which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I've got to work outside of lockdown. I've been to Las Vegas and Orlando and worked in a department with people from Iran and Italy and France, and it is brilliant. It is a wonderful thing. So one more for Natalie then. Emily wants to know, everybody actually, can you work from home during the virus? I've been working from home for 14 years, but how about the rest of us?
And I have to go to work for some of the lab stuff, but we can do lots of what we do at home.
Yeah, same. So obviously we don't send people home with all the sensors and they don't sit there on Zoom with the helmet on, which would be cool if we could do that. That would be really cool. But unfortunately it has to be done in our lab. So I've gone into the lab a bit, but anything that I'm doing on a computer, I've been doing from home. So that's a lot of looking at what I'm doing or planning things or reading things. We don't do that from the office like we usually would. We do that from home.
Quick one for Sarah. Do you ever photograph space?
I don't photograph space, but the same technology I work on is in telescopes that are in space that are photographing space, because the camera doesn't care what it's looking at. So yes, I've worked with lots of people who photograph space, and I've worked with people who are designing spacecraft that is going to Mercury and other planets to investigate them further.
Okay, because we've only got 2 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, I've quickly skipped ahead for any that I particularly like the look of. And one of my favourite ones that I've seen down here is, does anybody wear a white coat for their jobs?
I actually do.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, it's very sciencey. And we wear it because if you spill something on yourself that's radioactive, you want to be able to take off the white coat and leave it in the lab and not ruin your funky space jumper.
That's brilliant. Do you wear one, Natalie?
Never. I really want one. But no, sadly, I've never had a lab coat. I don't feel like
I've
a
got
cool
one hanging. You
scientist.
can probably see the bottom of mine just there on the wall. I've worn it for one experiment in 20 years. So yes,
Nice.
Physicists, sadly, for the most part, Sarah's just got some kind of outlier, but most of us physicists know we don't wear white coats for our jobs. Well, I am so sorry that we've not been able to get to all of the questions this evening, but we've actually reached the end of our time, and I hope you've all enjoyed it this evening. I hope you've seen that physics is a really great way of spending your entire life getting paid quite well just to play. Because I'm just going to ask you one last question that I've been asked several times this evening. Do you enjoy your jobs?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't want to do anything else.
That's brilliant. Yes, it's brilliant. It's great. We all sound really smug now. But yes, you can be smug too. If you grow up and become physicists, you also can be smug. It will be brilliant. So I hope you've really enjoyed it. I hope if you've already completed it, and I've not sent you the badges yet, sorry, I am working through. I've only got about 5 more to get through. But the rest of you, I hope you enjoy the rest of the badge. I hope you enjoyed doing this. And we would love you to keep doing it as well. Just because you got the badge doesn't mean you need to stop doing physics. If you look at physics.org, you will find a whole shed load more of experiments that you can do, and don't ever stop. You are already a physicist, and one day hopefully you can get paid for it as well, which would be brilliant. So it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from Natalie, it's
Bye.
goodbye from Sarah. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves this evening.